We are back with you live on Monday. This is live in Fort Collins. And today I've got with me Mr. Caleb Anderson, who actually just released a fun video. If you're living east of I-25, Greeley, Evans area, toddler thing, 5 fun things to do with toddlers in the Greeley area. But today we are going to talk to you about all things Fort Collins, Northern Colorado, what's going on, what's happening, things you can do, city council review, and specifically city council meeting this week where they were talking about charter amendments and also financing the election for 2025, which elections, Caleb, did you know how expensive elections could be? I mean,
I definitely something I overlooked. I was from a small town where elections were an afterthought, didn't hardly
yeah.
matter.
Yeah, no, we'll talk about it. We'll kind of dive into finances and things of that nature here shortly. But let's see here. We'll go over some things in the news that happened last week. There was a place in Denver that was ranked, one of the best places in the world. It's a new hotel called the Populus, and I'm going to bring up our screen so everyone can see it right here. But it's right downtown Denver by Union Street. Hotel rooms going for $170 right now, up to $400 if you're booking in April, May time period. But it's pretty eye-catching to say the least. I feel like this is gonna be one of those, I feel like a design style like this though, it's cool and it'll be like maybe like historic, but it'll be like one of those dated properties sooner than later. Like, oh yeah, remember when that was built in 2025?
Yeah, I think it's fun right now, but I think it's pretty contemporary, and I don't know if that'll stay in style or not. But super cool, and it's supposed to be carbon friendly, so carbon net zero for the property, which is pretty unique.
Yeah, I mean, I know Colorado just in general is really pushing towards a lot of things like that. So fun to see that take place. But yeah, if you're interested, here's kind of where it is, the Populous. So Union Station right here. So right downtown Denver. I mean, literally, if you want to do kind of a staycation, so to speak, Caleb, you could take Mustang down to Union Station and walk your way. That's probably about 10 blocks. Not too bad.
Good little walk, but it'd be fun getaway. Would you pay a premium to stay in that for the uniqueness?
We stayed at the Brown Palace in Denver. Just kind of as like let's get down to Denver. We've stayed a few different places, but Brown's Palace is kind of one of those historic Denver hotels that you can go have like tea time, like whatever it's called.
Wife has done that. Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know. I kind of balance between like Airbnbs and hotels and whether I want kind of a certain experience. That would be one that would be fun to probably stay at like one time, and unless you loved it. And, it seems like rates are relatively affordable. They're not like going crazy I bet you they can pop them pretty quick with having been named on that list. But,
interesting.
Kind of going from the best in Colorado to the worst. There was Wall Street, 24/7 wallstreet.com came out with a few different articles, and one of them was the worst city in each state. And in Colorado, it's Clifton, Colorado. Do you know where Clifton, Colorado is, Caleb?
Yeah, down there by Junction. I actually went through a year and a half ago. We went down to Grand Junction to visit a brother-in-law down at Mesa. And we went to a different little winery out there in the outskirts of town. And we went through Clifton. So I know exactly where this is. And it definitely looks a little beat up. So I can see it being on the list. I think there's a lot of seasonal work, a lot of agricultural related work, and low income work. Um, Funny enough, I did some research and I was checking. They have less drug related issues than other lists on the poverty list. So primarily financial. So kind of an interesting little town.
Totally. And it's right here between Palisade and Grand Junction. And, Palisade, we just drove through there last year when we were going down to Telluride. And, Palisade obviously is known for its peaches, nationwide. And, Grand Junction's a kind of a cool little area. I know I've had a lot of friends live there. There's people who are relocating there. I'm not a huge Grand Junction fan personally, but it's so close to the border of Utah that it gets a lot. actually less than the state. So, for being, one of the worst places, Colorado is worse than our worst city, which is interesting. But I gotta imagine a lot of that's kind of happened in the Denver metro area.
Yeah. And it's kind of skewed. Clifton's small. I want to say less than 20,000 people. So I think the percentage is super high, but in terms of an actual numerical data, I think it's still a pretty low impact overall.
Now, one of the things that's important to understand on these lists, especially just because there's so many lists and data can be skewed in so many different ways, I want you to take note of the median home value at $166,900. And in the same kind of vein, this 24/7 Wall Street came out with the cheapest cities in each state. And we had Sterling, but it's at $245,000, and median Sterling's at, how many people are in Sterling? Caleb, 14,000?
Yeah, 14 to 18.
Sterling. Let's go population.
Oh, 12,954 as of 2023.
And so Clifton, based off of this, has more population. So it's a bigger city than Sterling, and is much cheaper, $100,000 less, but isn't listed as the cheapest city. They only looked at 17 cities, so I don't know, all the ins and outs. So these lists are always kind of like, you take them with a grain of salt. You never want to end up on the worst city in each state list by any means. But I did think one thing was pretty cool, specifically about Colorado, is this America's 40 worst counties to live in. I felt bad for Kentucky. Kentucky is just a lot of kind of Sunbelt states, but Kentucky is littered on this list. Louisiana, but then at the very bottom, what do you think the three worst what states do you think the three worst counties are in, Caleb?
I'm going to give you a Kentucky, an Alabama, and a Missouri.
You'd be all three of those wrong.
Dang.
But look at all these Kentucky. Literally, I didn't count, but Kentucky dominates this list of 40 worst counties to live in. It is just present. The real answer, Caleb, is South Dakota and North Dakota.
Wow, would not have guessed that.
And it's, what it is? It's the Indian reservations, poverty, life expectancy. And I've got a buddy who, grew up on a reservation, and it's a very difficult place to live and grow up. And so, these counties are just pretty heavy as far as that goes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, all of them, South Dakota and North Dakota. I think, let's see here, South Dakota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. But the rest of the list is just dominated. But Colorado has not a single county on this list. And again,
awesome.
It's always interesting to know how these lists are developed and, how many of them are looking. And but this one, it looks like, they're looking at all 3,100 counties in the United States. So
very interesting, nice. Cool
stuff. We've had a few closures across towns, big name closures like Joann's Fabric. Walgreens is announcing some closures. Kohl's is announcing some closures. Fortunately, there's no Walgreens currently slated to close in Fort Collins, 3 in Colorado Springs, but they're planning on closing 1,200 stores over 3 years for Walgreens. And, vacancies are never a good thing for these communities. So it's, hopeful for Colorado Springs to get those filled up.
Yeah. Especially stuff like that. Commercial vacancies are just a different animal. So you hate to see it sit and have something weird come to the property.
Kohl's, the same thing. They're planning on closing a few stores. Fortunately, nothing in Colorado right now. It's in Aurora for Kohl's closing. And, Kohl's is right next to my house. We actually, one shopping center I think that's underrated. I think one of the best shopping centers in Fort Collins is the Scotch Pines Village Shopping Center. Mm-hmm. I think, that just right there, Drake and LeMay has awesome opportunities and restaurants, a good, mix of grocery and sit down and a little bit of retail, bakeries, professional services. I just think it's a really great opportunity. And then I don't know what it's called. Like, I should probably know that, but off of Harmony and LeMay, where Gray Rock is, Elevate Chiropractic, La Buena Vida, Ace Hardware, Fish's Liquor, but Kohl's is right there as well with Sam's and Honey Baked Ham. It's just a great little shopping center on the south side of town, really close to my house. So I'm hopeful that one doesn't close down, but it's not looking good for some of those bigger stores, but hopefully they can kind of get back online.
But think about it. How often do you frequent a Kohl's anymore? I know with even having great accessibility, we still order things online. We could walk into a store anytime. And I think I think the world is tough on a lot of retail outlooks anymore.
Well, and it's really, I think they were talking about, gosh, who was I talking to? And they were discussing about how can we campaign essentially to buy local and to frequent these stores and restaurants. And even if it's a little bit more expensive or inconvenient, to your point, without really putting our dollar where our mouth is, we could have vacancies, less opportunities. And, Amazon's 3 million square foot facility out there off of I-25 is just there'll be a second one of those built and no mom and pops.
No kidding. And you're right. I need to make that a big goal too, is try to spend local, get off the internet.
It's hard, especially because I think it was Gary Vaynerchuk who goes, it was cute when Blockbuster said, no, I think people really want to have the opportunity to come in, feel the movies, smell the popcorn, buy the treats, and then go back home. And Gary goes, I'd rather be in my boxers in my bed at home with my hair messed up, slobbering over myself with popcorn and not seeing the light of day, streaming Netflix.
Exactly.
And, so it's kind of the same thing. It just it's just tough when you're able to quickly buy something off Amazon and it show up the next day. So, big news for Fort Collins, and CSU really too, is we're finally getting to really use Canvas Stadium and it has been used for other opportunities. Like there's movie nights in summer at Canvas Stadium. There's high school football game, rivalry games that are there, flag football games for kids, championship games. So there is a lot of different uses at that Canvas Stadium, but nothing that's been huge comparatively to the CSU football games that are going on there. But there was a big deal in Fort Collins that Cheyenne Frontier Days, for whatever reason, terminated their contract with PBR and kind of caught PBR, professional bull riding, off guard. They reached out. They made an agreement with CSU Canvas, City of Fort Collins, to hold it at the Canvas Stadium. So professional bull riding is going to come here. I think it's July 21st and 22nd, if I remember right.
Yep.
But then in addition to that, they're having a world-class concert here now with John Party and Tim McGraw coming. I'm like, I don't know. I would have to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you're more in the country than I am. While Tim McGraw might not necessarily be in his prime, he's still not out of his prime.
Absolutely.
And John Party, from my perspective, is definitely in this prime, growing, if anything.
Yep.
Which is unique for Fort Collins from my perspective. Generally, the acts that we get to come here are kind of like the acts that are on their decline or kind of in their valley and making, this late in their career, circulation of venues.
Yep.
Did I lose you?
Oh, there, you're back.
Sorry about that. My internet, I don't know what's little kids might be on their tablets. Who knows? But no, we always get these acts that are kind of on their decline, past their prime. So seeing John Party and Tim McGraw come here for a 42,000 square, person venue, my guess is that thing's going to be packed.
Absolutely. I've seen both of these guys live. I love Tim McGraw. I saw him 4 years ago, I think in Nebraska. I don't know, been a while, but both of them are super good performers. And we were actually talking the other day, me and my wife, about Blue Arena out on the interstate and how they can host some events. I think the real thing is Fort Collins for a long time has not had a facility that could probably host something like this, or at least not one, like you were saying, that's utilized for it. So hopefully this will open the door to some really cool and big events. I think that's an awesome facility, and being right in the middle of town, why not?
Yeah. Now I know that Hughes Stadium, the old Hughes Stadium, had some bangers of acts come through.
Hmm.
In the 70s and I think 70s, maybe it was 80s and 90s. But since it's moved to, you're spot on. There's just not the venue in Fort Collins. I mean, there's some phenomenal venues like Washington's, the Aggie, the Armory.
Yep.
Some phenomenal venues that we had, which we actually had. The director of KRFC, which is the public radio, come on to our channel, and he just for our podcast, and that's going to be coming out here in a few weeks, I think. And just he had a lot of good insights about the Colorado Fort Collins music scene and its venues. So that I'm excited for that to come out. But
Yeah.
all right, driving here. Well, you can be honest with me. Are you still texting and calling on your phone?
Probably more than I should. I'm getting pretty good about having headphones in, which is downside too, or using my Bluetooth, but trying to put it down a little more.
It's tough, man. It's like such a bad habit, but it's a habit nonetheless that we need to break. Citations started at the beginning of this year for, it's a hands-free state now. You can't have your phone in your hand while you're driving. And I don't know the differences between, while you're driving, while you're at a stoplight. I mean, so I don't know, because I always justify to myself, like, it's a red light. So I'm like, real quick.
Yeah, I hear you're looking for gray areas already.
Totally. But what they said was some interesting things. They have a 135% increase of citations over the same period last year. They are estimating that there's been 3.3% reduction in cell phone usage, which is really not that much, but it's something new and it's not zero. But then the really interesting thing was how many accidents they believe they've prevented because of this. They're estimating they've prevented an estimated 88 crashes and 49 injuries with this new law taking place. So I don't know all of the data and how they're getting that data, but definitely, it's any life saved or injury saved is a good thing. So if they can equate it somehow and correlate it to that, then that's probably a pretty good thing.
And I think that correlation is tough to track. I spend a lot of time on I-25 and Highway 34, and those are both busy roads that during peak hours can see some crashes or bumper to bumper traffic. So I think people need to be aware and alert and make sure we're being safe.
Totally. All righty. Well, now let's jump into our city council meeting. It was a little bit of a marathon one, ran over about 210 minutes. But they reviewed a few things. Specifically, they're really looking at city code charter amendments, and then also allocating funds so that we can get an IGA. Test question. What's an IGA, Caleb?
Oh, man, you're breaking my heart. I don't know.
Intergovernmental agreement. So essentially an agreement between two different government bodies, city and county, city and city, an IGA. So to enter in that, it's probably like a good to understand, like a memorandum of understanding, contractual agreement, all this kind of stuff. But to be able to do that specifically with Larimer County, because Larimer County is who operates our elections. Counties operate elections, and we have to have funds allocated to be able to pay for the election to then be able to get into an IGA with Larimer County. So we had to pass this ordinance to allocate funds to be able to get going on the election. But there's also, if you don't watch city council meetings, they have a process, and that process is they come in, they allow for public comment. Public comment went for about an hour last night. Pretty much people can talk about whatever they want to, and then they get into the consent calendar, which is a lot of these, what is believed to be easily passed ordinances and codes and, allocating funds like $45,000 for arts in public places type deal. I'll show you, a project that's going on here shortly. And then they get into the discussion calendar, which then is like, hey, these are potentially really need to be discussed in public hearing, and then people can comment. So I wanted to go through a few things first. Let me share my screen. And if you're watching this live, feel free to engage, interact, ask comments, questions. If you're watching this on a rerun, feel free to drop a comment. We will get back to you. Real quick, I do want to put a plug in for our weekly newsletter that we send out once a week. Talks about things that are happening in Fort Collins, kind of a rundown of this, as well as things to do with links and links to our podcast, our market updates. So if you're interested in that newsletter, feel free to drop your email to me, and we'll get you signed up on that. So we'll keep rocking and rolling. But let me share my screen. We'll get in this bottom right corner. So one of the things they have to do is each year, we have a budget, and if there's funds that aren't used but are allocated to a specific project, they have to reallocate those projects to that and then vote it in. And so some of those, like I wanted to just kind of show some of these. There was $5 million of our about $600 to $700 million budget. So we used everything but $5 million bucks, and go through, what these were and why they didn't get allocated. $67,000 for ranked choice voting. We'll get to that here in a little bit, but this is going to be our first year in November for ranked choice voting. I think they should have. I don't know what your thoughts are on ranked choice voting. I don't recall there being an associated cost to ranked choice voting, but for me, adding an additional $70,000 for ranked choice voting, my vote would have probably changed.
Yeah, I don't know that ranked choice voting is a high priority on my scale either.
Yeah, and maybe $70,000 isn't much. Okay, so $700 million. So let's do a quick math. So that's 0.1% of our budget, but still, let's figure out something else to do that $70,000.
Exactly.
Construction, leadership summits, homeless shelter contribution. Like, here's something interesting, right? So they had $1 million that were allocated for this homeless shelter, but they had to reallocate it to 2024 because they were not expecting as many appeals as they got in 2024. So they weren't able to allocate that $1 million for that homeless shelter. But one thing that's interesting is they're expected to break ground on this homeless shelter in spring of 2025.
Yeah, it's moving right along.
And that's going to be off North College Avenue. Hickory, I believe, is the road, main, kind of cross sections. Red light cameras. They have to staff up. This is going to be, again, a huge revenue generator for City of Fort Collins. No speeding more than 11 miles an hour. I think you can get up to 11 miles per hour. And they're going to have these 2 AVIS systems, automated vehicle identification, but they have not yet, let's see here. They have not yet got the standalone units. There's going to be 2 standalone units. I can't see. Here we go. These funds are used to provide needed support for prosecution team working on the issues in 2025, particularly as additional freestanding units, which have not been deployed yet and to come online this year. So for those corridors where you see speed cameras in use, currently there are no AVIS systems in place, but it sounds like they're coming this year. So even if it wasn't one of the 6 red light cameras, there's going to be 2 additional AVIS systems that'll catch you going fast. And you're probably, as much as you can see the white Jeeps that are pulled to the side of the road that are catching speeders, people who are speeding, you're going to get to know those probably freestanding units pretty quick too.
Yeah, I made a donation, I kid you not, to the City of Fort Collins this morning. I woke up to a letter in my mailbox for a red light speeding violation.
What a red light, what was it, 40 bucks or 75?
$40. No points, no anything, but $40 for going 13 miles an hour over.
Yep.
Gotta ease up.
Shame, Caleb, shame. Pickleball donation, $11,000. This is for a noise, but essentially, there's going to be a pickleball facility outdoor in Fort Collins sooner than later. A lot of other things, but those were the main ones that I wanted to kind of go through. Just crazy that, there's challenges for one reason or another that they've got to reallocate funds on an annual basis. But all right, in Fort Collins, there was an ordinance. I believe it took place, I think maybe it was the beginning of this year. No, it had to be last year because I remember getting bills for opt-out fees of Fort Collins. But let's get here. Rank choice variances page 209. All right, here we go. Okay, so we have a single hauler residential waste program. Who's our single hauler, Caleb? I'm putting you through the tests, but you got to know
Republic Services. Oh yeah, we use Republic Services in a lot of places.
Good work. So Republic Services won the contract in Fort Collins to become our single service waste hauler. And if you do not use Republic, you actually have to pay $11 per unit for an opt-out fee monthly, which they bill you quarterly. So $33 quarterly for an opt-out fee. Well, with anything, there's going to be some things that, are learning opportunities and things of that nature. And people are pissed off for one reason or another because they're having to pay $33 per quarter for one reason that they just didn't feel is fair. So now they're making some variances to that program, such as, do you own a business and have a dumpster and are promising to take your personal trash to your commercial dumpster? You can get an opt-out. You can basically get a variance for that. Safety exclusion, where I think the trash haulers can't get to safely. So like if there's a bridge issue, a incline issue, things of that nature, if they can't get to it, safely. Remote dumpster. So again, wait. What was this one? Exclusion for properties served by a dumpster. So maybe, if there's a dumpster, this would be if you have multiple units.
Yep. And
it's one dumpster for the units. And then this one down here is remote dumpster, saying if you own a business, you can take your personal trash to your business and have that out. Habitability variance, basically saying if you have like a vacant house or a vacant property that doesn't get trash services, you can have a variance for that as well. So I just thought those were good because I think people do get frustrated when, they're like, I've never used trash or I've always done this. And now, considering I'm just getting billed $33 per month, which, it can be a chunk to some people who are on a fixed income, but City of Fort Collins voted on this. So if you're in the city as a resident, City of Fort Collins voted on this. And to make this financially feasible for Republic to do it at a discounted rate, supposedly, that they're doing, they had to have these opt-out fees because then they could kind of allocate costs for admin and all that kind of stuff across City of Fort Collins versus just those that are using the service.
Yeah, I'm glad to see some variances. I've got a client actually specifically off of Prospecting College in town I did some consulting for, and she has an in-laws house, a family member's house that's essentially sitting vacant. They can't sell this house until some family things change, etc. But there's not track service, and the house is, for all intents and purposes, vacant. And they still are enrolled in this program because it's either fight it or pay your $11 a month. So here they are.
Yeah, and fighting it, I will say this, like, it's not a huge city, at 188,000 people or 180, 170, somewhere in there. As far as the city size goes, we have a city government of 2,500 people. And I would say they do a good job of listening, but I feel like they just are there to be an ear and not necessarily do anything sometimes, like there to listen to you kind of complain, but not necessarily do anything at that point. So one opportunity though, Caleb, is for that client is to go talk in public comment at city council workshops, which people were, and that's why this is getting done. So if like you need something and you need your voice heard, you got 7 listening city council members on a weekly basis, every other week, to hear you talk about things.
That's a great recommendation.
We talked about art in public places. There's $45,000 for this art installation that's going to happen at, I think it's called the Schoolfield Park. I can't remember exactly what it is, but essentially over by Bacon Elementary. There's going to be two 8-foot sculptures and 3 4-foot sculptures. And these, I would say these are the kind of things that make Fort Collins just really pop and stand out, are just these kind of art in public places, street art on the buildings that are just, pretty cool. But these are approved, getting built, and it's going to be, here's Bacon Elementary and our new our new Mail Creek Trail, Bacon Elementary. Here's the park that they're talking about. And here are where the installation is going to be. So pretty cool.
Yeah, looks good.
Looks good. I agree. Okay, let's get to the ordinances now. It's going to be a little dense, and I am not an expert, but I will try my best to go through these, and we can kind of chat about what our thoughts are once we do it. All right, here we go. Wait, 362, not 262. All right, here we go. So these, what is the difference, Caleb, between city code and city charter?
That one I do know. City code can be voted on by the city council. Charter has to be brought out to the public for voting.
That's right. So anything in our city charter, which is essentially like our governing documents of how the city of Fort Collins operates, has to be brought in front of the city residents to vote on, to make a change in these charters. And a lot of this is kind of like, pretty antiquated language. And to Jenny Arndt's, credit, and I'm bummed to see her to go, honestly. I think she's a great mayor. I think she's extremely personable, empathetic, just all the things that I've enjoyed seeing in a mayor. She had the opportunity to run for a third term, but is not. And that is one of the seats that are up this November for election. And apparently there are 3 individuals at this point who are going to be on the ballot for mayor. And so we'll see what happens here. But one of her goals was to clean up the city charter. And that's really, she goes, it's not a sexy deal. It's not something that I can hang a feather in my cap per se, but it needs to get done. And it's just kept on getting kicked down the can got kicked down the curb year after year after year. And so they're facing this head on. I think we voted on 3 charter amendments this last November, and we've got another 5, I believe, coming up. So each one is an ordinance. And let's see here. This is just a correction of errors as far as that goes. Oh, no. Okay, this is for a registered elector who would like to challenge the qualifications of a city council member to notify the city clerk prior to seeking a court determination. So essentially, Windsor actually just had this. This should have never happened, but what happened was they had a difference between code and charter. The guy who ended up winning the mayor race couldn't serve because his term limits would have been too long when he was done with his mayor term. So he actually got revoked and somebody else got in. But if there is a qualification issue for somebody would have to bring it up to the city clerk to bring that up. So again, not sexy stuff here, but just trying to update it. A lot of these things too, one thing to take note of is all of these were passed 7-0 in city council. So each city council member, for one reason or another, agrees with cleaning this up, whether that be language. Some of these things that they're changing is like removing shall or must with shall, getting some terms like manpower and mankind to human power, humankind, he or she's to theys. So aligning with what state legislation is, but so that's what's happening here. Limiting limits on council campaign contributions to prohibit a political party, public service corporation. So essentially limiting campaign contributions. We did increase what we are increasing, I should say, what those campaign contributions can be, but limiting campaign contributions and how those can be, who can contribute. So there's people in city of Fort Collins, city staff who can't contribute to specific campaigns. I would have to imagine the city manager can't contribute to city council, because city council, I can't remember what it's called, but essentially city council has oversight of 3 people: the city manager, city attorney, and city judge, like the head city municipal judge. Those are their employees. They control whether they get fired, hired, pay increases. And then from there, those individuals really run the city. So on a day-to-day basis, I should say. So you wouldn't want the city manager being able to make a big old contribution to the mayor, right, and then have some conflicts of interest.
Little kickback.
Yeah, a little kickback never hurt nobody, right? All right. Let's see here. Publication requirements. Entitling councilman to request that an entire ordinance be read. Oh, this one's interesting. So this one was publicizing ordinances, not allowing a city of Fort Collins resident or whoever to come in and require a city council member to read the entire ordinance. And I think there was recently a House representative or state senator, one of the two, that what do they call it? A filibuster, that he essentially stood on the floor for hours or however long it was so that something couldn't get passed in time. Well, this is kind of adjusting that somebody, if they didn't want something to get voted on, like let's say in the past, there was a land use code that was hugely contested by both, there was 2 sides. Well, somebody could have, while the city council was voting on this, come up and said, I request that you read this ordinance. And they would have to sit there and read the entire ordinance per city charter. Now, what this is saying, okay, we are just going to make these available to you. You can go read them. If you can't read them, we will help you read them, but we are not going to let a city, somebody come into the city council and require us to read a ordinance. Now, between now and then, you want to go have fun with city council, go request them, go tell them to read an ordinance, Caleb.
Yeah, that sounds like fun for me too.
Absolutely. All right. Conflicts of interest right here. Oh, so selling of real property from a council member or mayor, there is apparently some issues of, eminent domain. Can that be sold? But what they're wanting to clear up is essentially saying, yes, there can be a sale from a council member or mayor to the city of Fort Collins, so long as that conflict of interest is known and a fair market value is sought. But right now, you can't. So let's just say, Mayor Arndt had a good example of, like, if I wanted to sell a foot of my, if the street needed a foot of my property, the length of my property, I couldn't sell that piece of property as we currently sit. And therefore that project could be delayed for 2 years or however long until that mayor is out of her position or sells that house or moves. So kind of an interesting one. Again, not from my perspective, not these earth-shattering things, just more cleanup of language.
Which is no fun, but it's something you got to do. Got to have.
This is the modernizing of the language and things of that nature. So here we go. Shall, taking out words he and she, dividing lengthy sections. So just literally trying to update the language so that it isn't this massive run-on sentence that is very difficult to read.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, this actually got postponed because they want to really get this clear. But if there is a vacancy, how do they fill that vacancy? And if there's an election coming up, is there a specific time period? And, the concern is, well, we need a mayor to be able to operate our city. And like the mayor pro term would take that place if the mayor were to go, for one reason or another, or a city council member passes away and somebody needs to take that seat for that city council member. These are what the vacancy requirements are going to be. They're going to have a work session on this, clean this up, and have like kind of a standalone discussion on this one specifically. So this one was postponed indefinitely until we get a little bit more clarity on that.
Yep.
Okay. Now, costs of elections, which this is just mind-boggling to me, but it is what it is. All right, 487. Let's go. Okay. This one's a little bit, it's not as clear as I'd like it to be, but essentially what they're saying here is if the city of Fort Collins was the only participating party and the state didn't have any, city and Larimer County were participating, and if the state was, what the cost of these things will be and how they're allocated. Because what it is if the state is a part of the election, they take 45% of the cost of the election. Let's see here if we can get one with the state. Nope. Oh, here we go.
Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Yeah. So this should be about 45%. Let's math it out.
Got calculator.
Let's see if they're right. All right. 491,895 divided by 1,300,100. Oh, nope.
They're cheating us.
They're cheating us. The state's supposed to take about 45% if they're involved with the election, and then the county has a percentage based off of that. But in this upcoming election, currently, the state of Colorado is not suspected to have anything on the ballot. Neither is Larimer County. So the city of Fort Collins is projected to take the full cost of this election. Now, I'm going to bring this over, sneak it in here. There we go. This year is our election cost. Our state and county participating, this is what our cost would be. If the state was participating but not the county, this would be our cost. County participating but not the state. But because neither the state or the county is participating, it's expected that our cost will be $430,000. We have about $120,000 or so already approved, or excuse me, here we go. 164 already approved. And then we have some additional costs because of ranked choice voting, $50,000. So they had to go to the city of Fort Collins and ask for an additional $317,000 so that we can then get into an intergovernmental agreement with Larimer County. And let's see here. Yeah, that's kind of basically it right there. But, oh, yeah. I do want to talk about this too. So this was for the election. Okay. So they're asking for $317,000 to cover the cost of the election because there's not going to be any county or state involvement. And we already have $114,000 slated. We need to increase it because of the cost for ranked choice voting. And that was approved 7-0. Now, one thing that also was approved is they increased it by $40,000, $40,500 to have a campaign oversight service provider. Basically, somebody playing referee on our campaigns rather than our city staff. And that's, again, kind of this conflict of interest type of consideration and, concern for our citizens. Learn it. It's funny going through it. Not funny. It's great going through all of these things, Caleb, because you learn a lot of why do we do what we do? And for elections, obviously, it's kind of something that's relatively known, especially on like, okay, one of the big concerns from people watching or, voting in a national election is, all of the, missed votes or extra votes or all these kind of different things. So there's not a ton of confidence in the process on a national vote. And what they want to do for the city is provide that assurance that we are running a smooth election process. Your vote matters. Your vote will be counted. We'll make sure who's able to vote can vote and who can't. So there is now going to be a campaign oversight committee that is going to play referee and try to make sure to the best of their ability that it's a clean run election.
I actually think that's better money spent than ranked choice voting. I think I would prefer that.
Yeah. If they exactly, I agree with you completely. If they would have gave us two opportunities, like saying, hey, ranked choice voting, it's going to cost $67,000 or $50,000, or we can have a campaign oversight committee that's going to cost $50,000. What do you guys want? All right. Most people are going to go campaign oversight committee.
Absolutely.
Because, or at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I think nationally, do they do ranked choice voting? They don't do ranked choice voting. No, it's just one or the other. So it's a big deal. Maybe they, but I agree. Like, I think having a campaign oversight deal is pretty important. But all right, we are through city council breakdown and on to things to do this coming weekend. Are you going to go run the Horsetooth Half Marathon?
Not yet. I've actually been working on it. I set some physical goals this year, but we're not running that by any means. So maybe next year. But
that sounds absolutely horrible. I do have a few friends that are running it, but what's their biggest gripe about that?
What's that?
Is that it's at least one person's biggest gripe is that it's being ran during the Masters. I'm not a big golf watcher, but I do find myself watching the Masters every now and again. I think it's like the reason I like watching the Masters is it's just for me, and I don't watch all of it by any means. Like maybe I watch an hour or two of it. For me, it's that spring. That means spring. Masters, spring to me. That I don't know. It's nostalgic. But Horsetooth Half Marathon, April 13th, 8 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. starting. I can't remember where they start, honestly, but I believe they end at New Belgium. And they start, okay, here we go. They start at CSU Hughes Stadium. Former Hughes Stadium.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. One thing that kind of looked kind of fun, I mean, I'm definitely not doing it, but the NOCO Easter keg hunt. Starting at Avogadro's number, I think it's 90, maybe, I can't remember the exact cost per person, $45 per person. Start at Avogadro's number, and it kind of just is a bar crawl, things to do as an adult. I'm sure there's tons of drinking that's going to take place. And, ultimately it's kind of like a scavenger hunt.
Yeah, the Easter keg hunt. I think I would have eaten that up a couple of years ago. A little tougher now with a toddler, but part of the fun around here is the beer scene. So I think if that's what you're into, get out and enjoy it, because that'll be kind of like a mini tour to fat. It'll be a lot of fun for people.
Yeah, totally. It seems fun. And while I'm not like specifically excited about this, I did want to bring to people's attention that Visit Fort Collins is a tenant of Old Town Square Properties, and they have this phenomenal building down in Old Town Square that is really becoming a community hub. They are having, you can hold company meetings there. You can hold, gatherings. You have to, sign up and apply and all that kind of stuff. But they have, I talked with Cynthia Eichler. She was on our podcast. I want to say through March, they had on average, more than one event there per day, almost nearing 2 events there per day. And on April 9th, an example of this is, Ram Talks, Notes from the Underground, a discussion about the skin of the planet Earth. Now, doesn't really spike my excitement or interest per se, but there's always an event going on at Visit Fort Collins in person, or if you need gathering space, that is a definite opportunity. So, Caleb, that's all I got, man. Do you have anything exciting for people to do this weekend besides enjoying 82-degree weather?
I think that's really the peak. We got through that last weekend. We had kind of that funny, it was sunny outside, but it was kind of snowing. It was kind of slurring. We had this weird little rain, snow stuff going on last week. So really just get out and take advantage of that first lick of spring, real spring, not the fall spring we've been playing with. So
we were supposed to have flag football on Saturday. They got canceled, and I was not upset about it. I was
no, it was brutal.
I don't need to go stand out in 32-degree weather to watch 5- and 6-year-olds play horrendous football. But
I'm telling your kids you said that.
What's that?
I'm telling your kids you said that.
I mean, you can tell them. I will say this. I starting to play pass and football and all that kind of stuff with my kids, or shooting hoops, all that kind of stuff with my kids. So it's definitely on me. Maybe there was a little bit of like assumption that my kids were just going to be like pretty phenomenal athletes. Not the case. I feel like my kids are the liability on this football team. I'm like, oh God.
They all take after you instead of your wife, unfortunately.
Something. I'm like, good luck. But I appreciate you guys watching today and every week. And again, we'll be sending out that newsletter tomorrow. So if that is of any interest, send us your email. We'll get you signed up. But Caleb, thanks for joining us today, bud.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys.
All right, take care.